Your mortgage rate is around 6.66% right now. That number was not randomly chosen by your bank, and the Federal Reserve does not set it directly. It comes from a market that most people never check. The same market influences your mortgage, your savings rate, the value of your retirement account, and whether companies can afford to keep hiring. In 2022, this market caused the supposedly safe part of millions of retirement portfolios to lose around 13% in 1 year, and a 1 percentage point move in this market can add almost $100,000 to the cost of a $400,000 mortgage. By the end of this video, you will understand how bonds work, why their prices suddenly fall, and how a number you can check in 5 seconds affects almost every major financial decision you make. A bond is simply a loan. A government needs money. A company needs money. A city wants to build a hospital or repair roads. Instead of borrowing everything from a bank, they borrow from investors. You give them money today. In return, they agree to pay you interest and return your original money on a specific date. The original amount is called the principal. The interest payment is called the coupon. The date when you receive your money back is called the maturity date. Suppose you buy a $1,000 government bond paying 3%. You receive $30 in interest every year. When the bond matures, you get your $1,000 back. That is the basic deal. The part that confuses people begins when interest rates change. Suppose you own that $1,000 bond paying $30 a year. A few months later, new bonds begin paying 5%. A new investor can now put down $1,000 and receive $50 a year. Why would anyone pay you the full $1,000 for a bond that only pays $30? They would not. To sell your bond, you have to lower the price. The price keeps falling until the buyer's total return becomes competitive with the new bonds. Your bond did not stop paying interest. The government did not miss a payment. Its market value fell because better paying bonds became available. This gives you the main rule of the bond market. When interest rates rise, existing bond prices fall. When interest rates fall, existing bond prices rise. Once you understand that relationship, the rest becomes much easier. The bond that gets the most attention is the 10-year U.S. Treasury. As of July 30, 2026, it was yielding 4.68%. This is a loan to the U.S. government for 10 years, and it acts as one of the main reference rates for the entire financial system. Mortgage lenders watch it closely. A bank could lend money to the U.S. government and earn 4.68%, or it could lend money to a homeowner. The homeowner might lose a job, stop making payments, sell the house early, or refinance the loan. The bank needs to earn more to accept those extra risks. That is why mortgage rates generally sit above the 10-year Treasury yield. The exact gap changes, but the connection is strong. Right now, the average 30-year fixed mortgage is around 6.66%. Take a $400,000 mortgage at that rate. The principal and interest payment is about $2,571 a month. Now raise the mortgage rate by half of 1 percentage point, from 6.66% to 7.16%. The new payment is about $2,704. That is only $134 more each month, which may not look enormous when you are already spending several $1,000s. Across 30 years, it adds more than $48,000. Raise the rate by a full percentage point to 7.66%, and the monthly payment becomes roughly $2,841. That is about $270 more every month. Over 30 years, the difference is more than $97,000. A 1-point move in interest rates can cost a homeowner almost 6 figures. The bond market does not send you a bill. The cost simply appears inside the mortgage payment. The historical comparison is even larger. In January 2021, the average 30-year mortgage rate reached 2.65%. At that rate, a $400,000 mortgage had a principal and interest payment of roughly $1,112 a month. In October 2023, the average mortgage rate reached 7.79%. The same $400,000 mortgage now cost about $2,877 a month. Same loan amount, same repayment period. The difference was 1,265 every month. If both loans were kept for the full 30 years, the difference in scheduled payments would be more than $455,000. That is why someone earning a good income could comfortably afford a house in 2021 and struggle to afford the same house a few years later. The price of the house matters, but the price of the money used to buy it matters too. Bonds also sit inside millions of retirement accounts. For years, the standard advice was that stocks provide growth and bonds provide safety. A common portfolio held 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds. When the stock market fell, the bond side was expected to reduce the damage. That worked reasonably well during many market declines. Then 2022 exposed the weakness in that assumption. Inflation was high, and the Federal Reserve began raising interest rates quickly. Return to the rule we covered earlier. Rising rates pushed down the price of existing bonds. The broad U.S. bond market lost around 13% in 2022. The S&P 500 fell around 18%. A basic 60-40 portfolio lost approximately 16%. Stocks fell, and the supposedly safe bond portion fell with them. The problem was not that the bonds suddenly became worthless. Older bonds were paying very low interest rates, while new bonds were being issued with much higher rates. Investors marked down the value of the older bonds. Some long-term government bond funds fell much more than the broad bond market. That happened because of duration. Duration estimates how much a bond or bond fund may move when interest rates change. Suppose a bond fund has a duration of 6. If interest rates rise by 1 percentage point, the fund could lose roughly 6%. It is an estimate rather than a guarantee, but it gives you a useful idea of the risk. Put $500,000 into a bond fund with a duration of 6, and a 1-point increase in rates could mean a loss of around $30,000. Now take another bond fund with a duration of 17. The same rate increase could mean a loss of roughly 17% on $500,000. That is around $85,000. Both funds might hold U.S. government bonds. Both might be described as high quality. One can still move far more violently because it owns bonds that take much longer to mature. The longer the bond, the more sensitive it usually is to changes in interest rates. A 3-month Treasury bill matures quickly. If rates rise, you get your money back soon and can reinvest it at the higher rate. A 30-year bond may keep paying the old, lower interest rate for decades. That makes its market price much more sensitive. This is why the word bond tells you very little by itself. A short-term Treasury bill and a long-term Treasury bond are both loans to the same government. Their prices can behave completely differently. If you own a bond fund, search for the fund's fact sheet and find the duration. A duration under 3 usually means relatively low sensitivity to rate changes. A duration around 6 or 7 means the fund can move noticeably. Once the duration reaches 15 or more, the price can swing like an aggressive investment, even if the fund owns government debt. There is also an important difference between owning an individual bond and owning a bond fund. Suppose you buy an individual Treasury bond and hold it until maturity. Its market price may rise or fall during that period. As long as the government pays as promised and you do not sell early, you continue collecting the interest and receive the face value at maturity. A bond fund has no single maturity date. The fund owns hundreds or thousands of bonds. Some mature, some are sold, and new ones are constantly added. Its price is calculated every day. When rates rise, the decline appears directly in the fund's value. Over time, the fund can begin earning more interest as it replaces old bonds with newer, higher-yielding bonds. That can help the fund recover. But there is no exact date when your original investment must return to its previous value. This distinction matters when you need the money on a specific date. If you know you will need $50,000 3 years from now, an individual treasury that matures close to that date gives you a clearer schedule. A bond fund may be more convenient and diversified, but its value 3 years from now is less certain. Government bonds are generally considered low credit risk because the U.S. government can collect taxes and issue currency to meet dollar-denominated obligations. Companies do not have those powers. A company can run out of cash, miss interest payments, or go bankrupt. Investors therefore demand more interest from a company than from the government. The difference is called a credit spread. Suppose a Treasury bond yields 5% and a corporate bond yields 7%. The spread is 2 percentage points. Investors are being paid an additional 2 points for accepting the risk that the company may have trouble repaying the debt. When the economy looks strong, spreads are often narrow. Investors feel confident. They believe companies will keep earning money and making their payments. When fear rises, spreads widen. Investors begin demanding more compensation to lend to companies. That can happen when profits fall, bankruptcies increase, banks become cautious, or investors expect a recession. This matters because companies depend on borrowing. A business planning to open new stores may cancel the project when borrowing becomes too expensive. Another company may freeze hiring because more of its cash is being used to pay interest. A heavily indebted company may begin cutting employees just to stay current on its loans. This is one reason the bond market can reveal economic stress before it appears in official employment reports. Investors are putting real money behind their expectations. Another signal comes from the yield curve. The yield curve compares the interest rates on government bonds with different maturity dates. Normally, long-term bonds pay more than short-term bonds. That makes sense. If you lend money for 30 years, you face more uncertainty than if you lend it for 3 months. Inflation could rise. Economic conditions could change. Interest rates could move much higher. On July 30, 2026, the 3-month Treasury yield was 3.82%. The 2-year yield was 4.23%. The 10-year yield was 4.68%. The 30-year yield was 5.21%. That creates an upward sloping yield curve. Sometimes the curve flips. Short-term bonds begin paying more than long-term bonds. This is called an inverted yield curve. An inversion usually means investors expect short-term rates to fall later. Why would rates fall? Possibly because inflation is slowing, the economy is weakening, or the Federal Reserve may need to cut rates. Yield curve inversions have appeared before many U.S. recessions. They do not tell you the exact date a recession will begin, and they have produced false warnings. Still, an inversion deserves attention because the bond market is saying that today's short-term rates may be too high for the economy to handle for very long. Bonds also affect the money sitting in your bank. The national average savings account has often paid far less than short-term Treasury bills and competitive high-yield savings accounts. Take $50,000 earning 0.38%. That produces $190 in interest over 1 year. Place the same $50,000 into a 3-month Treasury yielding around 3.82%, and the annualized interest is approximately $1,110. The difference is about $1,720 in 1 year. Over 5 years, ignoring rate changes and compounding, the gap would be $8,600. The bank account may be easier to access. A Treasury bill has to be purchased and then held or sold. A high-yield savings account may offer a better combination of access and return. The important step is checking the rate. Many people spend hours comparing the price of a television and never spend 2 minutes checking what their bank pays on $50,000. Treasury interest also has one tax advantage. It is subject to federal income tax, but it is generally exempt from state and local income taxes. That can make Treasury bills more attractive for people living in states with high income taxes. For savers worried about inflation, the Treasury also sells Series on Savings Bonds. I-bonds issued between May and October 2026 currently pay a composite rate of 4.26%. Part of that rate is fixed. The other part changes with inflation every 6 months. The annual electronic purchase limit is generally $10,000 per person. You cannot cash an I-bond during the first year. If you redeem it before 5 years, you lose the final 3 months of interest. So bonds are not ideal for money you may need next month. They can make sense for money that you want protected from inflation and can leave untouched for at least a year. You do not need to monitor every bond auction or become a fixed income trader. 3 numbers will already tell you a great deal. First, check the 10-year Treasury yield. When it rises, mortgage rates and other long-term borrowing costs often move higher. A sharp fall may mean investors are worried about economic growth and are moving money into government bonds. Second, check the yield curve. Compare short-term Treasury yields with the 10-year yield. An inversion tells you the bond market expects interest rates to be lower in the future. Third, check the duration of every bond fund you own. Without that number, you cannot properly judge how much the fund could fall when interest rates rise. Bonds are often described as boring. That is probably why so many people own them without knowing what they actually bought. But the bond market sets the price of borrowing throughout the economy. It affects what you pay for a house, what your savings earn, how much your retirement account moves, and how expensive it is for your employer to borrow money. Every major part of your financial life is connected to it. The people who understand bonds do not have access to a secret market. They understand one basic relationship. When rates move, money is repriced. And once you know where to look, you can see the effect before it arrives on your mortgage quote, your bank statement, or your retirement account. This is Gray Finances, money decisions made clear. Subscribe if you want finance explained with real numbers and no unnecessary noise. I'll see you in the next video.